All right, hi friends. We've been talking about time. And so far, the time that we've been practicing is time to the hour. And so when our minute hand is pointed to the 12, and our hour hand, our smaller hand, is pointed to one of the clock numbers, we can say that it is 3 o'clock to the hour. Okay, so that's the time that we were practicing last week. Today what you did is you just watched a quick video on time to the half hour. That means when our minute hand has only gone around half of the clock. Because a lot of times you're going to hear people say, I need to be somewhere at 4:30. Not 4 o'clock, but 4:30. Or if I look at my clock, someone might say, well, that's great that it's 3 o'clock, but I need to be there at 3:30. The way we do 3:30, or we do time to the half hour, is it takes, we talked about this last week, it takes a full 60 minutes for the minute hand to go around the clock. When that happens, our hour hand will move from one number to the next number if the minute hand goes around to the full 60. So I'm going to show you, it speeds up a little. But if I take my minute hand and let it travel around my clock all the way as if an hour went by, if you look, my clock says it's now 4 o'clock. That means that that minute hand went 60 minutes. It went all the way around my clock to the next o'clock, which was 4 o'clock. But what happens if my minute hand only goes halfway around the clock? Well, let's just take a look first. So if I say this is 4 o'clock, if I'm looking at a digital clock, it's all numbers, right? It would say 4 o'clock. So my digital clock matches. Now, what happens if my minute hand only goes halfway around the clock? Right now it's pointing up to the 60. It means it went all the way around. Let's take the minute hand. Where would halfway around my clock be? Down here at the 6, right? So let's take the minute hand and let's move it down to the 6 and see what happens. Now I'm not touching my hour hand, I'm touching my minute hand. So let's see what happens if I take it all the way down to the 6. All right, well, what's the number down at the bottom of my clock? I'm going to bring you in close here. It's the number 30, right? So that means it went 30 minutes around my clock. So it went halfway around the clock. But what happened to my hour hand? It's not pointing at the 4 anymore, right? And it's not pointing at the 5. It's halfway between that because my clock, my minute hand, hasn't gone a full time around the clock yet to make it say, to move it to the 5 o'clock. It only went halfway. When I see it like this is when the minute hand is pointing to the 30, it means that it is half hour. It's on the half hour. It's not an o'clock, it's at the half hour. So my minute hand is pointing to the 6, which means that it's pointing to the 30, halfway around the clock. Now, if I look at my time, has it moved fully to the 5 yet? Nope. It's still halfway between the two because it hasn't gone completely around. And remember when I moved from the 3 to 4, it went completely around and then the hour hand was pointing to the 4? Well, right now it's still pointing between the two. But right now it is 4:30. 4:30 because it hasn't completely moved to the 5 yet. So this is the half hour between 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock is 4:30, halfway through that hour. Now, if I take my minute hand and I complete that hour all the way back up to the 12. It's gone 60. Look what happened to my hour hand. It moved completely to the 5, meaning a whole hour, 1 hour, 60 minutes passed. So now it's back to 5 o'clock. Well, if my minute hand starts again, so right now it's 5 o'clock. Let's see if I have a 5 right here. I do. So it's saying on my digital clock, it's saying 5 o'clock. Okay, let's see what happens when my minute hand starts to move. I want to go to the half hour. I want to go halfway through my clock. So I'm going to take that minute hand and I'm going to take it back down to point to my 6, because remember we said that's halfway through. 30 is halfway to 60. So that's halfway through. What happened to my hour hand? It's pointing between the 5 and the 6, right? It's saying I haven't moved a full hour yet, so I can't point to the 6 yet. So it's still pointing it to the 5, so it's saying it is 5:30. So if I were looking at a digital clock, my digital clock would say, it would match. Remember how we said it's a 30 down here? Well, look at my digital clock. I have my 30 there, so it's 5:30 to my digital clock. It says it's 5:30. Okay, let's do one more. All right, so now if I go all the way up to the 12 and complete that hour, what time is it now? Now it's back to 6 o'clock. Very good. All right, and to make my digital clock match, I can't say 30. I have to go back to my o'clock, and it says 6 o'clock. All right, so let's try this one. Okay, let's try this one. Let's take a look. Okay, let's say right now it is what time? It is 10 o'clock. Okay, it's 10 o'clock. So let me get my 10 down here. So I can say it's 10 o'clock. And we'll match that clock up. Okay, so right now, not upside down, Mrs. Rainey. Okay, so it's 10 o'clock. All right, my minute hand, is going to start to move. So right now it's 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock. Watch what starts to happen. I'm going to go halfway around my clock. I'm going to go to that 30. Okay, what's happening to my hour hand? Is it still pointing right at the 10 anymore? It's not, because it's saying it's starting to move, and it's between the 10 and the 11, and it's pointing down to that. So it hasn't gone that full hour. So right now it is 10, and what do we say? 30, halfway through that hour from 10 to 11. So right now it is 10:30. What's going to happen when I continue going? And I'm going to go all the way back up. I want to get back up to the hour on the o'clock. Now I'm pointing back up to the 12, right? So it's an o'clock, it's on the hour, but what time is it now? That's right, it completed its full hour. So now it moved from 10 o'clock to being, and I have to put my 2 zeros here, it moved to 11 o'clock. All right, let's do one more. All right, what happens? I'm going to keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. I'm going to go to that half hour again. What time is it now? It hasn't made that full hour to go from 11 to 12, so it's still 11, and I have to change this to 11:30, okay? All right, good job on that time to the half hour. Time is tricky. Now what I'd like you to do is let's go ahead and take a look at our time to the half hour worksheet, okay? We're going to do some matching. So the first thing I want you to do is go ahead and write your name up at the top of the page. Okay, write your name up at the top of the page. Okay, and then what I'd like you to do is let's go ahead and cut out these times down at the bottom. Okay, let's go cut these times out at the bottom. All right, let's cut them out. And once you have those cut out, have some glue right there. Okay, get those times cut out. And we're going to practice matching times to the clocks. Okay. All right, so let me see here. I just about have mine cut out. If you need to pause while you're cutting yours out, go right ahead so that we can be ready to go. All right, so let's take a look at this time, okay? Let's take a look at this time. Well, actually, let's take a look and let's start with our first clock, okay? Let's work with our first clock. I'm gonna make my big clock match this one. All right, so I'm seeing that on that first clock, my arrow is pointing up. Let me make sure. I have to get it to the right clock. Okay, so now I have it right to the right clock. Okay. My arrow, my hour hand is pointing between the 1 and the 2, and it's pointing to the 30. Very good. All right, so on that first clock, if my hour is pointing between the 1 and the 2, and it's pointing to the 6, I know that it's going to be a 30, right? Because it's halfway through. It hasn't fully moved yet for that whole hour. So if it's between the 1 and the 2, it hasn't completely moved to the 2 yet. So it is still what time? It is still 1:30. Do you have this time down there? Does this say 1:30? It does. So we're going to glue that to our very first clock, okay? Let's go ahead and glue that to our very first clock, because that says, our clock says 1:30 and our time down below says 1:30. All right, let's take a look at this next clock, okay? Let's take a look at our next clock. All right, it is pointing to the 30, or to the 6, so we know it's going to be a 30, right? Let's take a look at where our time is pointing. It's pointing between the 9 and the 10, right? It's pointing between that 9 and 10. Has it finished its hour yet? So it has not moved to 10 o'clock. It is still 9:30. Very good. All right. Can you find your clock that says 9:30? Very good. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to put that with our second clock. It still says 9:30. Very good. All right, let's take a look at our next clock. What's our next clock? Okay, it's pointing to that 6, so we know it's another 30, right? It's halfway through. Now our hour hand is pointed between the 5 and the 6, right? It hasn't completely gotten that full hour to go to 6 o'clock, so it is still 5:30. Can you find your 5:30 for me? Very good. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to glue that one onto our 5:30 clock. There's our 5:30. Very good. All right, let's move to the next clock. We know it's going to be a 30 because it's pointing to the 6. It's going to be a half hour, right? Okay, now it's sitting between the 8 and the 7. Has it fully moved to the 8 yet? Because it's still only halfway through. So it is still, the number right before it is 7. It is 7:30. Very good. All right, can you find your 7:30? Okay, and let's go ahead and let's put that on our clock. Okay, so we are at 7:30. Very good. All right, let's go down to this next clock. Pointing to that 6, so we know it's going to be a 30. It's half past the hour, right? It's only gone halfway around the clock. All right, well, let's see. Where is it sitting? Our hour hand is between the 11 and 12, so it hasn't completely moved an hour yet, so it's still going to be 11:30. Very good. It can't be the 12 yet because it's not pointing to the 12 yet. It's sitting between the 2, so it's going to go to the 11 because it hasn't fully moved that hour yet. Can you find your 11:30? Okay, and we're gonna glue that on to our clock. All right, let's look at our next clock, okay? Pointing to that 6, so it's gonna be halfway through, right? Well, let's go see. It's sitting halfway between the 2 and the 3. It hasn't fully moved to 3 o'clock yet, right? Because it's only gone halfway around, so it is still only 2:30. Very good. Can you find your 2:30 for me? Very good. And we're going to glue that on. Okay. How about this next one? It's pointing to the 6, so we know it's a 30, right? It hasn't gone fully around. But it's sitting between the 12 and the 1. It has to go all the way around in order for it to move to that 12, right? So right now, or for it to move to that 1, sorry, Mrs. Rooney made a mistake, to that 1. So right now, it is still only halfway after the 12, right? So it's still only 12:30. Very good. Can you find your 12:30 for me? Very good. And let's go ahead and glue that on. Okay, and the last clock, let's take a look. All right, it's pointing to the 6, so we know it's going to be one of those 30s, right? But right now, that hour hand is still only pointing, it's sitting between that 7 and the 6, right? It's going to have to go all the way around in order to move to the 7. So right now, it is only 6:30. Very good. Can you find your 6:30 for me? Very good. All right, and let's go ahead and glue our 6:30 on. All right, there you go, my friends. All right, great job. Telling time is tricky, especially doing to the half hour, but I wanted to introduce you to it, okay? All right, great job, my friends, and I'll see you in a little bit.